Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Too Lazy to Read the Paper, the show where normally someone explains a paper to me because reading papers is hard and talking to people is fun and natural. And now for a corollary. A corollary? Probably corollary. If someone is too lazy to read a paper, they're definitely too lazy to read the manual. So today I have a new format. There's no paper. Instead, there's a thing we've all been talking about, maybe in the shadows, agentic coding, Claude Code, Codex, whatever they're all called. This whole business of handing an AI your research and letting it write and run the code. And my sense is that getting started on this is a big hurdle to a lot of folks. So to help them and to help myself, I'm sitting down with the all-round genius, Renaissance man, deep thinker, connoisseur of all things coding and living in the terminal, and honest and decent person, YY Ahn. YY is the Quantitative Foundation Distinguished Professor at the School of Data Science at the University of Virginia. YY and I go way back to the Center for Complex Network Research at Northeastern, where we were both postdocs in Laszlo Barabási's groups. That sounded wrong. Laszlo Barabási's group. Fast forward to now, it's a decade and a half later. YY stands out as the person I want to talk to about agentic coding. So let's cut to the chase and let's hear my conversation with YY Ahn. All right, welcome to the pod. YY, I feel like yeah. So this is a special occasion. I'm bringing back the podcast. It used to be called Too Lazy to Read the Paper. Now it's called Too Lazy to Figure Out How to Use Claude Code for Science. And I am here with the special guest, YY Ahn, who is a very old friend. We started out together in science at Barabashi Lab. And before we get going, I want to ask you a little bit about, or give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about actually the science that you're doing in your group. I have been following it. The papers are brilliant as always, and also your website is a great one that I look at and check regularly, and I will put notes also in the show notes for those who want to YYify their lives. But tell me, I'll shut up since you're the one being interviewed, and then tell me a little bit about what you guys are working on at the moment.
Yeah. So I've been fascinated by this latent space that machine learning generates,
Yes.
especially related to graphs and networks. So that has been kind of driving a lot of research recently. Uh, I would say like bridging network science and machine learning and representation learning,
Yes.
and using that understanding to address interesting problem in society, for instance. Yeah. So, for instance, when we think about this graph representation learning, we've been kind of digging into like what's really happening. And one thing we found is that um, the uh, the bias, degree bias from random walk is canceled because of the bias in like optimization function
Hmm.
in negative sampling. And that kind of lead to the correspondence to the gravity law, which means we can kind of impose kind of nice interpretability in the embedding space when we have trajectory data. So we've been applying that to like scientific mobility, uh, like finding invisible borders in urban space, or thinking about like belief embedding. So lots of different applications. Yeah.
Yes. But but so immediately kind of the question that comes to mind, and it's not really kind of, but it's that part of what's awesome about networks is the discreteness. It's the
Yeah.
paths, it's all of the things that are not continuous. But
Hmm. Hmm.
representation is about kind of taking the network and putting it into a machine learning space. So if we're kind of now we're getting off on a tangent already, but it's because your work is awesome. So can you kind of try and like talk about what is it that we gain from jumping between? Is there even anything to the network anymore? Is it just a data set? Then we put it in a representation and then the representation tells us everything, or what's going on there?
Yeah, actually, I think a little bit underexplored questions
Yes.
is basically how to combine these two together.
Yes.
Uh, there's such a nice property of like this continuous representation because we can find like meaningful axes in the space. We can measure distance in a very smooth way and so on. So there are
Mhm.
lots of good things in the representation space, but network provide like really discrete connection. Like a good example is that maybe not an example, but good scenario to think about is you have a very kind of smooth network structure like chain-like.
Mhm.
If you embed this into the representation space, it will be kind of smooth manifold.
Yes.
Uh, and the distance from the end to end will be very far, right?
Mhm.
But then in network, you can connect them.
Yes.
There's no constraint regarding those connections.
Totally.
And it also reminds me, I think it was science paper about this long range, like really strong connections in social networks.
Yeah.
So I think combining that information is what like was really exciting, I think.
I totally agree. And I
Yeah.
think like we should also be honest that of course if you add that connection, you're also changing the network quite dramatically. A lot of network
Mhm.
properties, as you add the shortcuts, also really make huge jumps. So it's not so
Yeah.
weird that the space would have to be reconfigured as well. Um, this is super cool. So I also saw you posting on something that's called the Platonic representation hypothesis, which is this idea that when you train neural networks on large amounts of text, but you could also train them on data from physics or whatever, some people have thought that maybe there's a kind of Platonic space underneath that
Mhm.
maybe it all converges to the same thing and that some in some way mirrors reality or is this very interesting representation of reality. So I saw so yeah, I follow your blog. I'm a fan, and so I saw you posting on it, and basically you listed, like here's the paper, here's someone expanding on it, and here's someone saying, well, maybe it's all bullshit. And so
Yeah.
this leads me to kind of also say, like, how do you think about, representations more generally? We really live in this representation world. So
Mhm.
how does all the work on graphs connect to these other representations?
Yeah, in a way, we are living in a shared world. It's a one world. And whatever perspective we take, it's a slightly different, but yet very similar uh,
Yes.
kind of truth underneath. So graph can be one way to look at it, like focusing on explicit relationship.
Hmm.
And a lot of machine learning and representation learning will be finding more continuous representation that capture that space. So I think there's a kind of constant tension between like explicit versus implicit, and I think it's interesting to look at
Totally.
knowledge graph versus just the embedding.
Yeah. And in my group, we also work a lot on embedding. So I thought a lot about these. So consider this a kind of teaser to the the yet to be made podcast where we go deep on embeddings and how they reflect reality. But this is a kind of Claude Code for I don't even want to say for beginners, but for scientists. So it's this idea that we've really seen people all over the interwebs get the Claude Code fever. All of a sudden, you fire it up on your little computer at home, and you realize, wow, this thing can do amazing things. You can do all kinds of things within code. But I think it's not wrong to say that you've been a pioneer in kind of applying, and I say Claude Code, but we'll talk about, of course, it's just one approach to coding with AI, and there's competing solutions that are also good from many other purveyors of general intelligence. But we'll talk about Claude just because it's also the one that most people have played with. So I wanted this conversation to be about, what does this mean for a scientist? And maybe you can start by sort of saying, if you're coming to this completely cold and you just want to get a sense of, what even is Cloud Code? Like, what is this thing? Do you want to kind of lay it out a little bit?
Yeah, so I think everyone has played with ChatGPT and all these chatbots, right? And to me, Cloud Code, Codex, and all these coding agents are basically putting them into your computer so that they can interact with your files, essentially. I think that's what really
Yeah.
is. And I mean, people call it harness. And what that means is like kind of providing tools that it can launch or use, and then kind of how to say, kind of basically harness them so that they stay in their lane, not to
Yes.
do the things. So it's kind of allowing them to use tools and at the same time kind of preventing them to weird things. So it's a combination of them. And in addition, maybe a more specialized model, although it's becoming less specialized. Like Claude Code works with Claude Opus really well, or Sonnet, because the model is kind of trained to use the tool that Claude Code provides and work in the harness
Yes.
system. Yeah.
And in a way, like I've experienced that working with Claude Code is almost nicer than working in the web interface to Claude somehow because
Way
it's
nicer. Yeah.
it's almost as if like whatever tweak they have for the harness makes it be a little bit more rational and thorough so that like so it's not gonna, skip a beat or whatever. But I think this is perfect, right? Claude Code is really like a way to put Claude in contact with a subset of tools that are available to your computer, all the coding tools, and then you can have it, play around with your files, but in a way that it's like locked in a place. I think this is also like how, if I had, had to, I would like, I think this is totally right. But then it somehow is also extra amazing to someone like you because you work like the kind of canonical way of working with it is staying in the terminal, right? It's staying in this part of your computer that is the classic way to approach code. And I remember you from, like back in the day living in the terminal in a very real way. Like you had this thing called dot files that are these little files that the all the various programs in the terminal reads, and setting up your terminal really well, figuring out a way to code in the terminal, knowing all the shortcuts to move around files and so on. So I think, is that one of the reasons that you were kind of an early adopter, is that it brought Claude into that world, or coding agents into that world?
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I was working with like dot files, Beam, and all this like command line interface ecosystem
Yes.
before Claude Code. So it was just, like super natural to try out. And another thing I would to just quickly mention is Claude Code is maybe it's a little bit of misnomer potentially because it's not just about coding, and it's about anything in your computer. So anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
no, no, no,
so
I agree. Like
yeah,
you could say, I'm working on a manuscript, help me outline the arguments. Like here's some of the things I've thought help. Like it does all of, it's not just coding. It just is really good at coding too. Uh,
yeah, and I think if I count all the usage, I think the actual coding is smaller percentage than other parts of the work.
yes. All right,
And
but
actually, the first thing I did with the Claude Code is kind of revamping my dot files,
nice.
make it nicer and easy to install and easy to manage. Yeah.
Yes. So, but so there is like I introduced this term Claude fever because people, when they first start using it and finding out how amazing it is, they kind of tend to become obsessed with Claude for a little bit and, have an unhealthy, like it has all this, like all the bad stuff of social networks. It has this variable reward, like you have to sit and wait for it a little bit, and then like what comes might be awesome, but it might also be terrible. And there's like the waiting time is unpredictable, and like so many parts of it is unpredictable. It does amazing things, and you kind of like if you don't have the big usage plan, it'll be like now you have to take a break and it makes you obsessed. So like what is your story of becoming obsessed with it? If you can if you can share that.
Yeah, I installed quite early and tried out, but I think this January it really start to take off in terms of like what it can do and how well it does. So um once that kind of that model, I don't know exactly what the model number is, was, but once that hits, you really kind of feel that, oh, something is different here. And uh, after that moment, I was just trying to basically test it out because it's there's no way, how to say, no way to go back, you know.
Yeah.
So there is a moment where, oh, coding is done, a solved problem. There was just a moment that hit that I don't have to like code anymore. And the way I experimented was basically building like really small tools for myself, like timer or uh, static site generators,
Yes.
all these like little tools. Actually, my homepage, it was one of the first project I made. Basically, I have a large wiki, personal wiki, and I set kind of private public through front matter, and then the tool basically generate homepage from my wiki, so I don't have to manage different like homepage wiki separately. Now it's just all in my wiki, and what you're seeing is essentially whatever in my wiki that's made public and published. So, um, so I think I've been also at the same time scared to really use it in research because it's so slippery slope.
Totally.
The slope is like really slippery. So if you just let go and write code for you in the context of research, it's really hard to ensure that is actually correct. So I was
Yes.
very, yeah, scared of that. So it was mainly about like building tools and experimenting how well it works in various tasks. And also things like managing files or like filing some file that downloaded and so on.
Yes.
So yeah.
I mean, anything that can be verified somehow and that, and I agree, like research is a kind of special use
Hmm.
case
Hmm.
where I've also been very careful. Also in terms of, you know, basically, I mean, I'm also like a little bit weird that way, but I like writing and I don't want it to take over the writing because I'm so particular. But there's
Hmm.
still lots of writing, you know, that I don't care about that is
Right.
amazing
Yeah.
to have it done. But I
Yeah.
also see it as a kind of almost like an API into unstructured data is another thing, right? So your wiki is unstructured, but if you wanted to query your wiki for some information that you know is in there, but you can't really find it. Oh, hang on. I think we have some lag. Can you still hear me? Okay,
Uh,
we came back. I don't know what
yeah.
happened.
Yeah. You were saying wiki is unstructured.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes. Okay, so we'll cut this and then but I think like one of the things that you know like the wiki that you have essentially if you're looking for some piece of information in there, the Claude is also a way to kind of go. I mean, now you can grab and use the terminal tools, so you can probably find it. But in case it's like some bigger thing, it's also like in a weird way like an API for that, right? Or if you have a Word document with a bunch of information in it and you want it moved over to an Excel sheet in a certain format, Claude can also do that for you. And it
Yeah.
might even write a script to do it so that you can verify that it worked. And I guess
Yeah.
verification is also important.
Yeah. One of the things that it really kind of removed much of this hassle is kind of ingesting like papers into my wiki. So I have a skill, I can just send the URL and it fetch metadata through OpenAlex and archive and whatever DOI. It downloads bit file.
Yes.
It creates a wiki page with those metadata. And then I think one really cool thing you can do is like it knows, it kind of knows relevant papers and it can search for that in your wiki and make link to those
Ah,
pages.
yes.
So
That
I
is very
mean,
cool.
you want to once you ingest, you want to kind of read through and so on. But I think that like more or less every time it discover a linkage that I didn't notice, like oh this author wrote this paper. Yeah, so there is a more kind of richer
Yes.
link structure that it can create.
Yes, super cool. All right, but now we're already talking about skills and maybe getting ahead of ourselves. So I think now we kind of laid out, okay, what did like this, what is this kind of machine? What are some of the things it can do? But it can still be a little bit abstract. So let's talk about AI for science. And so we or agentic coding for science or cloud code for science, whatever we want to call it. And so we already kind of covered that the scary thing is that if it's really mission critical, it can generate so much code and so quickly that just trusting it blindly is pretty dangerous, right? Like I think we can say like lots of billion-dollar companies, I think, do trust it blindly, but in science we want to be extra careful, right? So, what are some use cases for scientists that you think are kind of no-brainers? Like if you're starting to use it today, how would you use it? What are some of the things that you use Claude for?
Yeah, so I think the first step is, as I mentioned, I feel like every scientist should have some kind of knowledge system that
Yes.
they, I mean, it can be Zotero, it can be Wiki, Obsidian Wiki, and so on. Um, Kind of managing that, I think it can help a lot. Like I just said, instead of like manually typing title, URL, and so on, it can just automate that step and then make connections. So I think knowledge ingestion is kind of the first step. And
Yes.
also
And if
Um,
if we can just pause on that, like,
yeah.
so you are kind of disciplined and awesome person, and I'm the opposite, right? So I started like a wiki 3 times and then abandoned it because then when I got busy, like I wouldn't update it. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to keep notes instead. I'm going to keep the notes in this way. And so I have these kind of old abandoned knowledge systems floating around, and what I found is that Claude or good agentic coding can also help you with that. You can literally say, "Oh, here's like this old stuff I have.
Mhm.
Like go ahead and let's organize this." And it'll kind of take the words that you have written and then make new sense of it. And then it can integrate across time. And of course, this is a lot of work. This is some of my own Claude fever, was this idea of like cleaning up my kind of scattered pieces across the past. But it's also to say that, like for stuff like that, like just weird stuff. Like I was saying, like just go through all my tweets and figure out like this is another place where I when I quit Twitter, I downloaded all my tweets. It'll just like write a script to go through and extract all the links and see what's valuable, right? Or like
Mhm.
it's quite amazing how easy it makes, again, serving as a kind of API, a
Yeah.
programming interface to all
Mhm.
kinds of weird unstructured data. So
Yeah, yeah,
even if
totally.
so even if you don't have your own wiki, it can still help you make sense of your kind of personal history of ideas that you can draw on
Yeah,
and build from.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
And also it's just not the mechanistic stuff, but also, I mean, you can learn new subject fairly easily. I mean, it hallucinate time to time, but at the same time, it's so easy to just keep asking questions
yes,
that you'd be very embarrassed to ask to
totally.
actual human being. So I think there's a value in like
But can you give
learning.
examples of that? Like just, like don't make it too embarrassing, but just to give people a sense, like questions like about stuff you did, or what are the questions you can or the type of questions?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I cannot think of like concrete example at the moment, but say you are learning this mathematical theory or whatever, and then
Yes.
you don't understand this like small part,
Yeah.
which may be like undergraduate um, calculus or like really elementary math. And I struggle for
Yes.
those.
No, no, but I mean,
So
look who you're talking to. Like you don't have to be you don't have to be embarrassed in any way. Like what I don't know is kind of very impressive for someone at my career stage, I would say. So yeah, absolutely. Like for learning anything, it's amazing.
yeah, and I mean, I did have some experience like it hallucinate like totally crazy things. But you can always like cross check, and then if you really understand the subject, you kind of know. I mean, how to say? So if you understand enough to kind of reconstruct by yourself,
Yeah.
then you
But
realize,
you need a kind of bullshit detector. That's also
right?
true
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
But I mean, but also it did amazing stuff. Like I had something that was pretty messy, and I did never did this because I thought that was overkill. But it said basically like, do you want to do an embedding of all of this information so that we can, search it more efficiently?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just to give people like a sense of how capable it is. Like if I wanted to take some old set of notes that I'd been taking over the years in, let's say, Apple Notes, and export them to
Yeah.
Markdown and then explore them. Like, and I wanted to put them in some embedding space, like that would be a huge undertaking for me. I would need to figure
Mhm.
out like what's the right tool to do this, how
Mhm.
would it actually work, do a ton of data cleaning and so on. But with this kind of tool, you can really set up something like that in a very, very short period of time. And
Yeah.
and then you can of
Yeah,
course also do,
can
yeah, if it's a research corpus, you can do the same clearly.
yeah, you can basically build the infrastructure that help you navigate your own
Yes.
knowledge base. Yeah.
Yes. And this ability to code, as you were kind of saying, I don't need to code anymore in a certain way, right? Like another place where I think you can use it without too much danger is in data visualization, right? In the early days of our work together, like we spend a huge amount of time making beautiful plots in I don't can't even remember what was cool back then, but it's like after that, for example, D3 came out. And
Yeah.
D3 for me was always a pain in the ass. Like I could get a network running in D3, but like when you're used to Python, you it's a big story. But now you can kind of say, "Oh, I wrote a paper. I want to make a website for the paper and let's make all the plots interactive. I'll give you the data and it can just do insanely beautiful D3 visualizations of the of all the plots in your paper. And all of a sudden you have this like beautiful re-representation of the stuff you did, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, in a way, data visualization is now more of a kind of critique process, iteration
Yes.
process, rather than like coding, right?
Yeah. I think like
But
now I'm jump. Oh, go ahead.
but I think there's a kind of interesting point there where I mean many people already said this, but now your taste kind of matter much more. Like you can totally create like totally how to say ugly and non-informative visualization. I mean, the chance is lower, but you can still do that if you cannot really distinguish what makes um, a good visualization from like bad visualization and what are the principle behind it, right? So,
But maybe we can jump on like a big side train here, which is a question I had planned on saving for later, but maybe it's fun to take it now, which is
mhm.
this thing about, you know, you have kind of all of the experience and skill to use these tools, right? So you you had to learn to code the hard way. You're a great coder. You know how to make visualizations. You know how to think of things, right? And I wanted to create like a data visualization in D3, and I also know like what the constraints are. So I could say, I
Yeah.
want you to start with a planar graph and then put a little force between the nodes so that they can move around in a natural way. And I want to squeeze into this container. So like don't let it float off to the sides, and then it can build the visualization. But if you don't have a language for those things, if you don't know the underlying science, then you can't really use these tools. So it becomes like a thing that's an advantage for kind of old farts like us, but um, something that is something subtly different for young people and students and so on. So how do you think about this kind of this change where like what is it that we should be teaching the students? How do you see this disadvantage? How do we make sure that the next generation is also on board?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think that's the question, right? That's
Yes.
really the question. And I just keep thinking about it, but it's not easy. I mean, there are certain things that we we can totally skip. I mean, we are not learning computer architecture, assembly, and so on anymore. So in that level, at that level, we may skip a lot of like those details
Yeah.
and a lot of programming education was just figuring out, oh, why this code doesn't run.
Yes.
And it's like usually like semicolon here or some bracket here. So I don't know, it feels like that maybe not the thing to focus
Yes.
more. But at the same time, like how can you train basically your eyes and nose to smell like something funky going on, right?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
also, but also, I think that, you and I are both physicists by training. And I think that there is also something that comes out of physics, which is a certain discipline in how you even think, right? So,
Mhm.
so by, like you have to learn like big theory, then another big theory that's completely different, then another big theory that's completely different. And along the way, it's not really that, like how to do quantum mechanics that's useful, but it's that your brain acquired the discipline necessary to learn the quantum mechanics. And
Mhm.
that structure in your brain, that muscle, that discipline is what makes you good at thinking through all kinds of problems in a principled way. And I think programming is one of the ways where you take this kind of soft human brain, like that's made for kind of, I don't know, like navigating in nature or, whatever it's built for, and then turning it into a better analytical machine. And that's what we do as scientists. So,
Yeah,
like, do we lose that, you think?
yeah, exactly. So one thing I'm thinking about is like we basically replaced like I don't know 8 to 10 hours of field work, hard physical labor into maybe a couple of several hours per week
Yes.
hard work at the gym.
Yes. Yes. I
So
see you posting on protein and stuff too. So, you're, you're staying in shape.
and in a way, I think we may need mental gym
Yes.
that we we really deliberately do the hard mental work
Yes.
regularly.
Yes.
And that should be maybe part of the point of education. Like in class environment, that's kind of rare opportunity to really nudge student to do their own work
Yeah.
without any device. So maybe we should spend way more effort to make those classrooms like really, how to say, a precious time to
Yes.
those mental gym work.
Yes. Mm.
And I think that also makes it kind of challenging for us because our brain can atrophy very quickly.
Yeah, I'm
It
aware.
just yeah, it's kind of embedded in Claude Code 24/7. So yeah.
What about in your group? So one thing is kind of classroom teaching. What about your students, like your PhD students, postdocs, and so on? How do you talk to those guys about AI? What kind of advice do you give to them?
Yeah, good question. I should do better. Definitely. I'm encouraging to play with it and learn how it works because it, yeah, it's kind of hard to think the future where they don't use AI
Yeah.
in research and very successful.
Yes.
And also the student right now, they are kind of a senior enough, and I kind of trust them to have a fairly good judgment, and they already kind of know the basics in a way.
Hmm.
Uh, so I don't worry too much about them. But there's an incoming cohort of students. That's where the headache.
Yes, that's where we
Is.
should worry, right? Because it's like you were hinting at it and then I distracted you, I think. But like the important thing is, you know, as you say, like the semicolons and so on are maybe not the important things to learn from coding. And there are definitely important things to learn from coding and from learning, theories of how the world works. But what are the important things? Like, what is it that we should be doing in the classroom, Jim? And that's kind of yet to be determined, I think. That's like we haven't figured that out yet. But that is
Yeah,
like the big question.
yeah, but things I'm thinking about is like, um, I remember there was a kind of example classroom activity from, I don't know, Vietnam or somewhere
Hmm.
in computer science class. No computer. It's just a hard algorithm question.
Nice.
And basically you have a pen and paper to come up with the efficient algorithm and analyze why that's efficient and so on. So that type of work is still like really valuable. Um, and I'm also thinking about like journal club,
Yeah.
just reading a paper in a deep way.
Yes.
And I'm really concerned that like I think now many kind of young students kind of read a
Hmm.
paper
Yeah.
by putting them into like notebook LM and then ask a bunch of questions and then you read that paper, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's quite concerning. And I think a lot of mental gym work maybe just like really focused reading
Yeah.
and comprehension.
But maybe there are also some ideas in like recreating. Like I still feel like the best, like when like I read papers the most
Mhm,
carefully when I
mhm.
really needed them in my
Right,
own
yeah.
work, right? Like when you
Yeah.
really need to be like, all right, whatever these guys did, like I need it now. It's maybe the code is not available, so I have to figure out how did they even code it up. And like trying to get there, that's like when you get in and you're like, wait a minute,
Mhm,
what?
mhm.
This is what they did? And I think that could also be something that could be
Yep.
maybe streamlined with
Yep.
agentic coding, right? Because you could kind of reproduce a paper with Claude and learn a lot from that, let's say. So that's also
But in a way, it's getting like too good. And if you
yeah,
ask it to reproduce, it may do one shot.
sure. Yeah,
So
all right.
then you
So
may not learn much, right?
it's suitable constraints. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I was also thinking that we should definitely, like I was thinking you mentioned this example from Vietnam, and then my inner thought process was like, but how do we find those problems? And then it was like, let's ask let's ask Claude.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem.
Yes.
Like instead of like thinking by yourself,
Yes, exactly.
you basically have a meta prompt
Totally.
that's just popping up first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just scary. Like, luckily, my kids are kind of crazy and they are very skeptical and they tease me if I look anything up at home. So they go like, "All right, here's old dad trying to look up anything online." So yeah. All right. This is awesome. But so uh, we got sidetracked a little bit into this bigger question. I think it's an important discussion and I think it's cool we had it, but I kind of build this as, Claude Code for science. And we talked a little bit about, all right, so there's the idea of kind of organizing your idea structures and making it searchable and where you can kind of think like, where is it in my own life that this new idea I had, where does that connect? Or the work that I'm doing, how does that link into the bigger picture of whatever I'm trying to build in science, right? But there's also a
Mhm.
lot of kind of practical things. So I saw you had a skill that was, like being reviewer zero or something like this. There's like prepping stuff to submit to archive, and there's a bunch of different things. So maybe we can start by saying, okay, so you mentioned skills for Claude. Um, And there's a kind of a lot of ways to say every so we should say that what I mean, maybe we should start like super basic. So if
Mhm.
there's an AI doing chapters in this podcast, now is a good time to do a chapter that's called super basic. So we know first of all that AIs get more expensive and they kind of go crazy when the context window is very long. Yet, like one of the things that you say is that you just have a kind of Claude session open all the time. So, and we also know that like when you use the chat, like Claude comes in fresh every time. It's a new instance. It doesn't know anything. So let's think about kind of how does if you were to explain how that works, let's go through those things one by one. So you have a Claude window that you have is kind of like your main go-to Claude that you use on your computer. You access it from different places. Where is that? What's going on with that Claude? Does it remember everything you said, or how do you use it? Do you make it forget once in a while? How does that work?
Yeah, so basically it's a LLM. So you have all the context prompt, and then that get injected. It produce new token. That get injected, produce new token. So that's how LLM works, right? So you open up. You can have a kind of main session open. It's up to you. You can restart whatever. And then Claude has a remote control codecs. You can also access through mobile. What that means is it's kind of synced across mobile phone and your computer. So you can have a kind of one continuous session. So when the context grows, then a lot of information, most of which may not be very useful, get injected to the context, and then means the quality of answer may degrade, and you're spending more money essentially. So I think there are like multiple ways to do it. One is just don't think about it. Just do whatever you want. Because yeah, I mean they are building harness to address that problem. Like, I feel like Codex is kind of a little bit better in that regard. You don't really have to think about all these like context lengths and issues. But Claude is more kind of hands-on. What they do is the default is they do something called compacting. So it's basically asking another model to summarize what happened and what's the most essential information in the context, and then start a fresh session with that context injected so that
Mhm.
you can kind of continue. But you still may miss like critical information, so it's not perfect. And the mileage may vary depending on what you're talking about. But it's totally viable solution that you just keep using the same window. It will take care of it. Occasionally there will be compacting, which is kind of slow and it takes some time. Yeah, so that's one. Other one is just whenever you finish a work session, just clear and restart, and you start fresh, right? And what it load is the system prompt, all the harnesses and how to behave and so on. And then your user level cloud.md or agent.md, that instruction goes in. And then
And
your,
that's important to
yeah,
say, right? So that's one of the ways that you can keep persistent information
right.
between sessions is that you can
Yeah.
put a file or you can have Claude put a file, it's easier in the whatever directory that you are working in, and you'll always be working in a directory that's a part of the
Hmm.
harness.
Hmm.
And then you basically have a file in there that Claude knows to look at to
Yep.
kind of situate it in like this is what we're doing here, right?
Hmm.
And that's one of the key ways that you can have kind of continuity working with this maniac who
Yeah.
who wakes up fresh, once in a while, right?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a user level instruction you can store in your dot files,
Yes.
whatever. And then you can consider every directory as a specific context. And whenever there's some important information you want to provide, you can put a claude.md or agent.md file. And then whenever Claude get launched or kind of start work in that directory, it reads that information and use it for the rest of the session.
Yes.
Yeah, so I one I think mistake I see for many people is like you try to put too much information in those files and it become really long. And that's a kind of issue because that get injected in every conversation turn,
Yes.
and that increase the context very quickly. And a lot of information is not have to be there because remember, like Claude can use all the tools, bash tools. So you can read files, you can figure things out. And open is better to let it figure out rather than kind of writing that down into that file.
Yes. And a lot of that is just like literally research into that the less you can tell it, the better almost. But then you also mention another persistent thing, which is skills. So how should people think about the skills?
Yeah, I think it's unnecessarily complicated right now. There
Yes.
are like skills, agents, comments. There are like all those things.
Memories.
Huh?
They also make memories.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But you can think of all of them as just the instruction
Exactly.
in and text file. And I think the distinction will gradually be gone and everything will be just, I don't know, skill or whatever.
Yes.
And like even agent, you don't really have to create an agent. If you have a skill, you can launch a sub-agent with the skill. And
So
that's
try and explain that. So both the agent and the skill.
yeah. So agent is let's talk about skill first. So skill is just a file, text file with a front matter that explain like when you need to evoke this skill or when can be used. And that front matter is exposed to Claude initially, like in every session. So Claude know this inventory of skills you have. And then when it realize, oh, this is time to invoke this skill, then it reads the file,
Mhm.
then goes through the instruction in that skill file. And skill can be accompanied with the tools. It can be Python script. It can be whatever command line interface tools, MCP, whatever. It's all like tools that Claude or agent can use, and you can package them together as a skill,
Mhm.
right? So that's what it is, and it can be as simple as, oh yeah, commit and push whatever change we have in this directory. Or it can be very complicated, like, oh, we
But
have this
so,
paper.
but but let's do the simple one first. So let's say
Yeah,
that so you're working, and it's always a good idea to work in a repository that where you can commit to Git or
yeah,
GitHub, so that if Claude does something bad, then you can revert to an earlier state.
yeah,
And Claude is super good at working with GitHub, or Git. So like one of the pain points in the old days was that like you'd work and then you get and then solving, whatever your Git conflict was could be like that's 20 minutes out of your day on
Yeah,
fixing some
yeah.
stupid problem. But now Claude just does it. It can look back in time and it can see where it was, and if it accidentally deletes something, it can
Hmm.
usually restore it and so on. So you're working in Git. Now, every time you're tired to write like, oh, hey, Claude, would you commit everything that's in this repository and push it to the remote or push it to where I keep my Git stuff? Then
Hmm.
you're saying, I'm going to make a skill now. And what
Yep.
could that skill be? Like, what would it look like?
Yeah, the prompt matter will say, oh, the name of the skill, description is invoked when user says, oh, let's commit or let's finish the work or let's sync,
Yeah.
whatever, when it should be read. And then the instruction will say, oh, yeah, now we are committing all the kind of unstaged changes in the repository. First do this, do that, pull, fetch all the remote upstream changes, compare, and then merge and push and so on. So you can write that down, but usually it's better to just ask to create a skill. And basically, you can say, oh, I want to create a new skill where I want the skill that I want to use when I want to commit and push all the changes. Ask me questions to clarify.
Yes.
And you answer some questions and it will create a skill for you. Yeah.
Yes. So that's a skill. And then you said, but they could also be much more complex, like
Yeah.
submitting a paper to archive, I think is one of the ones that you have.
Yeah. Preparing.
Preparing. That's what I
Yeah.
meant. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. It's very dangerous now with
Yeah.
archive. I, so in case you haven't heard, archive is very anti-AI, and so they want you to they can if they find any provable case of AI in your papers, they'll kick you out for a year, and then you never get to commit to archive or submit to archive again, unless your paper has already been published. So they're pretty serious about not so don't so only prepare. Don't necessarily commit without really checking. Anyway,
Yeah.
you want to
A lot
prepare
of work.
something.
Yeah. A lot of work is really kind of manual, right? You clean up all the comments, you prepare the bib entries in a specific ways, and so on. So those are kind of the main work.
Yes.
So the already like package exists to clean up your files and so on. So the skill use those existing packages and checklists essentially to go through, okay, do this, do that, check, check, and just create a copy of the paper that's ready to be uploaded to archive.
Yes.
And you can also run basically reference check skill, which I also made, which basically query OpenAlex and other like services to validate entries you have. And it flag basically, oh, I cannot find these entries. Can you check? And and also you can, if you keep asking, you can also web search and check those entries kind of manually. I
Yeah.
I found that works pretty well most of the case,
Yeah.
but
And I've
but
also noticed that this is one of the places where language models still hallucinate, is
right,
in
yeah,
in terms of like scientific reference. That they come up with
yeah,
a lot of papers that are kind of like it almost seems like they have a paper in mind, but they can't like recall the precise author list or the title, so they come with something plausible. So it's actually incredibly important to run this kind of check to make sure that you're not putting even more garbage out
yeah.
into the
But
universe.
I think one important thing is like I also try to use the skill in a way to kind of inject DOIs
Yes,
so that it can manually verify them.
absolutely.
And
And of
all this
course, like,
code, yeah.
and just to be like super clear, and that's just so I don't get canceled as a scientist, like, you shouldn't just have like Claude come up with a bunch of references and then like
Right, right.
fix them and be like, oh, it's all fine. Like it is, and I actually mean this very seriously. It's super important to cite like the relevant papers and not just come up with lazy citations. But it is important to check nevertheless, just because you might be lazily saying, "Hey, fill in this paper that you know exists and that you have read," and then it still fills in something that's garbage. So it's important to check.
Yeah.
All right, super cool. But then you mentioned something with agents and skills that you wanted to explain. So let's maybe talk about that.
Yeah, so sub-agent is just a closed session that Claude can spawn, right?
Yes,
So it can spawn many agents at the same time. And then what happens is you spawn the agent do something, report back. It's all text, right? Report back, and then the main agent look at that result and then do something, right? So it's again, think of agent as a kind of a tool that Claude can
yes.
use. Um,
But
and
so but can you specify that, because this is something that I actually haven't used. So is that like an agent? Can you have like a list of agents that you know that have like certain specializations that are connected to skills?
yeah, so one way is create agent file. Again, that's instruction.
Yeah.
And and basically tell the agent what to do and what to report. So that's
Yes.
one way. Other way
Then how do
is
you invoke it in like if you're doing something?
ask, okay, launch a sub agent with this skill.
Yeah,
That
okay.
this sub agent, like it's the
Yes.
same thing like slash
Yes.
agent
So
name.
like let's say you want like an ultra critical sub process like if you're producing something, you want one to really be the kind of reviewer three attitude to any project. You can
Yep.
say you can have an agent with that attitude to say, can you use that for this last piece of text or whatever?
Hmm. But the important thing is like you're not observing everything the sub agent is doing
Yes.
usually. So you only look at what filters through the main agent.
Yes.
So sub-agent is useful for, again, like things like, oh, like put this paper information into my wiki. Then it just go ahead and do some work. And I don't have to really look at
No.
what's going on there. And
It's simple
yeah,
enough that you trust that
yeah,
it'll do it without you having to be
right.
like on top of everything. Very cool.
Yeah. But you can invoke those agents just through skill. You can just say, oh yeah, launch a sub-agent with this skill.
Yes.
So it's essentially more or less the same thing. And now Code has a agent view. Have you used it?
Nope.
So if you type like Code agents, then it has a slightly different kind of view
Hmm.
where you basically have a list of sub-agent and you can use like arrow key to go into that agent and come
And
back.
see what they're actually doing.
Yeah, so it can be useful when you just spawn many agents, but I these days I just tend to use like manageable number of cloud window because I do feel like a little bit of what people call this AI psychosis.
Yes. Like
And
it is also very fragmented attention, right? Because like then you
right,
might
yeah.
start something and it'll take 3 minutes, and then you're like, oh, I have 3 minutes. Like, let me answer emails for 3 minutes, and then you like come back and you're like, it's this kind of very, very kind of task switchy behavior
Yeah,
that's not good for the brain or focus
right.
or anything.
So right now it kind of nudges toward that direction because it's not fast enough to make you kind of stick to that window, but it's also not kind of long enough. I mean, you can make like verification system and then use Go to run it for, I don't know, 24 hours, but it's not quite there yet.
Hmm.
So it's in the middle,
Yeah.
and it really encourages you to just constantly switching context, which
Yes.
is not great.
No,
Yeah.
it's terrible. I mean, I can feel it almost. Like if I've been working with Claude a whole day, my brain is completely scattered and it's much harder to sit down and just chill or be be, like in a relaxed state because you
Yeah.
feel like you should constantly and like being in the like Claude also is like very flow like I think because they can stay at like the right difficulty level, and especially if you're having a couple windows open and you're like doing something, and it can feel really great to use it, but then at the end of the day it's almost like like there's a bill to pay. So for sure
Yeah, you
no.
feel productive.
Yes, exactly. um all right, awesome. But just so people understand, so in practice, if you want to, like, let's say you want to get started and you say, like, okay, I want to get like some of YY skills and put them on my computer so that I can start, get, I don't think we have to talk about all of them. You have also one that, critiques a manuscript before you send it off and has like principles um for like getting feedback before submission, which I think is like really awesome and helpful. And because it's plain text, people can just go and read the instructions, which is nice. And you have all these nice skills. So let's say like now you're like, okay, I want to try and use this for my science. They know how to find you because it's in the show notes. How do they get going on using the skills in practice?
Yeah, so I will start from like really simple skills like commit and push.
Yes.
Those type of simple things. And then just ask it to create those skills and open the skill text to see what's happening. So get some understanding of what's happening first, I'll say.
Yes.
And after that, I think you can try things out. I have the package or plugin Claude Scholar. So that's on GitHub. Um, you can probably just point to that URL and then ask it to install.
But if you
Um,
wanted to know, like, where on your computer does it put the skills and stuff?
oh yeah, yeah. So it in Mac, I, I believe it's in the like .cloud directory in your
Yes.
like home directory. And within that .cloud directory, there is a cloud.md, agent skills, all these folders, memories,
Yes.
plan, everything lives there. So, so you can basically navigate to that and open the files and read the instructions. The way I do is like I have this big dot file folder that manage the skills, and then I have a script to symlink that into dot cloud directory. So basically, if I have a new computer, I just install that file folder, and then all the skills are there for
Yes.
me. And same for like codecs and other agents. So it really make it easier to move between computers and keep everything synced.
Yes. And I mean, like, we could do like a whole thing on dot files, but I just wanted people to have a sense of where they could actually find this stuff because one of the things that I like about it is exactly that it's all plain text. Like, somehow you can go in and you can see what is it that Claude has of memories of like the time you spent together. What is it that it noted down in the MD file about like the project? Like there's something nice that you can actually see and change all of these things. And I think it's nice that it's out in the open. All right, but we're already like 10 minutes past the hour. People are angrily going to be yelling from for me here at home. You have a day to get to. I feel like we only scratched the surface, but hopefully we got some things down. Um, Maybe like one last final topic, and then we'll wrap it up, is this idea of portability, right? So, as you said, when Claude 4.6, I think, came out, all of a sudden it got really really good. And then like 4.7 is also fantastic. And so right now, like Claude is where I've been spending the most time. You've been mentioning Codex. There's also a Google coding agent, I think. And like, how do you think about making all of this portable? Because it is a little bit like investing in an ecosystem. But what if, like, first of all, like if everyone is addicted to Claude, like then they're going to raise prices. Maybe that'll be untenable. Maybe someone else is all of a sudden super great, and like then you want to switch. Like, how do you think about portability? Maybe also having like a local LLM if you have like a powerful computer at home. Where do
Mhm.
you think on all of these things?
Yeah, I think the biggest worry for me regarding like this ecosystem is that these very few companies can dominate all these LLMs and AI agents.
Yes,
And that means they have a power to control your thought, essentially.
yes,
So that power is probably the biggest kind of danger we are facing. So in that sense, I think we should really push for kind of standard portability, open source LLM models, open source harnesses, and so on. So I'm using Pi agent mainly as a
hmm,
kind of open source alternative. And one nice thing UVA provide, and I think many universities provide, is that they install like huge models in the research computing system, and then open that API endpoint to like university users. So that's kind of nice because you can use those open models with a open harness,
yes,
and that can totally replace many of the tasks that you do with the Claude or Codex. And you don't have to get locked in to one of those services. I mean, the problem is the frontier kind of keep moving, right? And once you try out like the best model right now, it's hard to use like
yeah,
slightly inferior models. So that's I think the main challenge. But like open source models, I keep getting better, and we are at the point where even open source model are pretty capable of doing, I don't know, 80-90% of things you do.
yes,
So yeah, I think everyone should try out these open alternatives and
yeah.
promote them. Yeah.
Yes. All right. I think I completely agree, of course, and I also agree that it's almost impossible to actually use the open source because, of course, like in your day-to-day work, like you want the most capable, most competent model, and like the, the smallest misstep, like it's super annoying when you know it could just work. So
Yeah,
so
but
it's
but
yeah,
but another thing open source model and some of the local models provide is very strong privacy.
yes, totally agree.
So yeah, your data doesn't have to go to third
Yes.
party servers.
No, no, no. I was
Yeah.
thinking about, like taking all my emails and embedding them to get a sense of everything. And that I would never share with Claude. Like I would have a local model for. for doing
I'm
that work.
I'm still like so too scared to touch
Yeah, yeah, me
anything.
too. Like, but it
Yeah,
was an idea, and I thought
yeah,
maybe if I get some innocent little thing that is running strictly on my machine, and I can
yeah,
have an
yeah,
overview, it could be super fun to see to make a timeline timeline out
yeah.
of all that.
I
Yeah,
mean, kind of in a way, ironically, now people are buying like Mac Studio, like Mac Mini,
exactly.
because there are lots of this uh,
Yeah,
use
yeah,
cases. Yeah,
yeah. So the big topics I wanted to talk about, but I didn't get to was like in many ways, if you use it for research, I hear more and more people that are saying I don't need grad students because basically it can do the job of a grad student. And I think it's going to be a real issue, especially in math where these models are super capable, that in like a high pressure environment where it's like publish or perish and you have to be awesome at all times, that aspect of education is also going to be threatened. Basically, that in the old days, you would get a grad student to amplify your ability to produce work, but nowadays, maybe you could just have agents doing it for you, and then we're cutting out even one more layer of the ecosystem, right? And I think that's
yeah. That's the full day of podcast topic.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a whole
Academic incentive system and yeah.
yes, exactly. And then like all of the de-skilling and stuff. So, but I think we covered a lot. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain this, and we'll cut it. I don't know how to end on a good thing, but maybe you want to say bye, and then we'll end it.
Thanks for having me, and so good to see you. Yeah.
Yeah, you too, man. Awesome. All right, we'll cut it
Go
here.
ahead.